Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. It started, as I suppose these things often do, not with a bang, but with a whisper, a digital chime in the quiet symphony of our comfortable middle-aged life. Her name was Eleanor, and for 25 years she was the steady rhythm to my melody. We were a classic, a well-worn vinyl record you put on a rainy Sunday afternoon. We had the house in the suburbs, two kids who had successfully flown the nest and were navigating their own adult lives, and a shared history that felt as solid and dependable as the old oak tree in our backyard. We were approaching 50, a milestone that felt both monumental and mundane. It was a time for reflection, for quiet satisfaction, but also, it seemed, for a creeping sense of restlessness I failed to recognize until it had already taken root and begun to poison the soil of our marriage. The Tinder app appeared on her phone one Tuesday. I remember the day because I was grilling steaks and she was sitting on the patio, a glass of Chardonnay sweating in her hand, her face illuminated by the familiar bluish glow of her screen. She laughed, a light, girlish sound that I hadn't heard in a while, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. It wasn't jealousy, not then. It was curiosity, perhaps a little bit of nostalgic fondness for the woman I'd married, the one who could find such simple joy in things. She showed it to me, swiping through faces with a playful flick of her thumb. "Look at this, Mark," she'd said, her eyes twinkling. "It's like a game, all these people just out there." She explained it was her friend Brenda who had put her onto it. Brenda, newly divorced and navigating the treacherous waters of modern dating, had declared it a hoot. Eleanor wasn't looking for anything, of course. She was just curious, she said, a bit of harmless fun, a way to feel a flicker of that youthful excitement, the validation of being seen, of being found attractive in a world that so often renders women of a certain age invisible. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Our trust was a fortress, built over decades of shared dreams and weathered storms. A silly little app couldn't possibly breach its walls. So I smiled, told her not to get too many matches and break the internet, and went back to the grill. I didn't see the flicker for what it was, not a spark of harmless fun, but the pilot light of a devastating fire. In those early weeks, it was just that, a game. She'd sit beside me on the sofa in the evenings, our bodies a comfortable and familiar distance apart, and narrate her swiping adventures. "Oh, he's got a fish. Why do they always have a fish, Mark?" she'd chuckle. "This one says he's an entrepreneur. That's code for unemployed, isn't it?" It was a shared joke, a piece of modern absurdity we could observe together from the safety of our marital bubble. I found it amusing, this window into a world we had long since left behind. It felt distant, unreal, like watching a foreign film without subtitles. You see the drama, the intrigue, but you don't understand the language, so it can't truly touch you. The first subtle shift was the privacy. Her phone, which had always been a communal object of sorts, left on the kitchen counter or the arm of the sofa, started to migrate. It was now perpetually in her hand or face down on the table beside her. A notification would chime, and her eyes would dart towards it with a speed and intensity that was new. She angled the screen away from me, a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of her wrist that nonetheless felt like a closing door. When I'd ask who she was talking to, the answer was always breezy, dismissive. "Oh, just Brenda, or some silly match from that app. He thinks he's Casanova." It was plausible, and I had no reason to doubt her. The lies were small, insignificant seeds planted in the fertile ground of my trust. She started talking more about her youth, about the woman she was before she was a wife, before she was a mother. She'd reminisce about college parties, about backpacking through Europe, about the thrill of uncertainty and the allure of the unknown. I listened, of course, but I heard it as nostalgia, a common symptom of turning 50. I didn't realize she wasn't just looking back, she was looking for a way forward, a path that diverged from the one we had been walking together for so long. The compliments from strangers, delivered in bite-sized digital nuggets, were like a potent drug. "You're gorgeous. I can't believe you're almost 50. You have an incredible smile." Each message was a little hit of dopamine, a confirmation that she was still visible, still desirable. I had, I admit, grown complacent. I saw her beauty, of course, but it was a comfortable, familiar beauty, like the landscape of our home. I had stopped vocalizing it, assuming she just knew. I didn't realize she was starving, and these strangers were offering her a feast. Her appearance began to change. She bought new clothes, sleeker, more youthful styles that were a departure from her usual comfortable elegance. She spent more time at the gym, her body tightening, her energy levels soaring. I was proud of her, happy for her. I saw it as a woman taking control of her health, of her confidence. I was a supportive husband, cheering her on from the sidelines, completely oblivious to the real motivation behind this transformation. She wasn't doing it for herself or for me. She was doing it for them. For the faceless profiles on Tinder, for the promise of a fleeting connection, for the validation of a right swipe. Then came the first secret meeting. She told me she was having dinner with Brenda. It was a Friday night, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening in. I kissed her goodbye, told her to have fun, and settled in to watch a movie. It was around 11 when I sent her a text, just a simple, "Hope you're having a good time, love you." The reply didn't come for over an hour. "Having a blast, Brenda is hilarious, see you soon, love you too." Something about it felt off, the exclamation points, the slight delay. It was a feeling I couldn't quite grasp, a tiny splinter of unease in the back of my mind. The next day, I was putting away laundry when her phone, which she'd left on the bed, lit up with a notification. It was from a man named James. The message was brief. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." My heart stopped. Just for a second. The world tilted on its axis. I stood there, a pair of her socks in my hand, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. James. Who was James? Was this one of the silly matches? Was it a joke? I tried to rationalize it, to find an innocent explanation. Maybe Brenda had a new boyfriend named James and Eleanor was talking about him. Maybe it was a prank. My mind clung to these possibilities like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. When she came into the room, humming a tune I didn't recognize, I said nothing. I couldn't. The words were lodged in my throat, a lump of fear and suspicion. I just looked at her, at the woman I had known for half my life, and for the first time, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. She smiled at me, a bright, beautiful smile, and asked what I wanted for lunch. And in that moment, I realized we were living in two different realities. In mine, the foundations of our world had just cracked. In hers, it was just another Saturday. The lie had been born, and I was its unwitting accomplice. I chose ignorance, not out of stupidity, but out of a desperate, primal need to preserve the life we had built. To admit that something was wrong would be to admit that our fortress was not impenetrable, that our love was not invincible. So I said nothing. I pretended I hadn't seen the message. I made sandwiches for lunch. We sat in the kitchen and talked about the garden, about our son's new job, about all the mundane, beautiful things that made up our life. But underneath it all, the splinter of unease was still there, working its way deeper into my heart. The game had changed. It was no longer a shared joke. It was her secret, and I was on the outside, looking in. The whisper had become a murmur, the quiet hum of a secret life running parallel to our own. And I was beginning to understand the language. It was the language of betrayal, and it was a sound that would soon become a deafening roar, tearing our world apart. I didn't know it then, but that Saturday was the beginning of the end. It was the day the woman I loved began to disappear, replaced by a ghost who haunted our home, her fingers constantly dancing across a screen, swiping away our past, our present, and our future, one match at a time. The shift was gradual, insidious. It wasn't a sudden storm that capsized our marriage, but a slow, rising tide that eroded the foundations until the whole structure was unstable, ready to collapse at the slightest tremor. After that first text message from James, a new layer of awareness settled over me. I started to notice things I had previously overlooked, to see patterns in the static of our daily lives. The phone was the epicenter of this new, fractured reality. It was her constant companion, a third party in our marriage that demanded and received more of her attention than I did. It was the first thing she reached for in the morning and the last thing she put down at night. Its screen was a portal to a world I was not invited to enter, and the faint glow it cast on her face in the darkness of our bedroom felt like a spotlight on the growing chasm between us. The excuses for her absences became more frequent, more elaborate. Dinners with Brenda, who I was beginning to suspect was now a convenient alibi rather than an actual participant in these outings. A new book club that met on Wednesday nights. A sudden interest in late-night yoga classes. Each excuse was a paper-thin wall she constructed around her secret life. And while I could see the cracks, I lacked the courage to push through them. I was afraid of what I would find on the other side. The emotional distance grew, a palpable coldness that seeped into the spaces between us. Our conversations, once a free-flowing river of shared thoughts and easy laughter, became stilted and superficial. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give me a brief, edited summary, her eyes already drifting back to her phone. The easy intimacy we had shared for 25 years began to evaporate. An attempt at a deeper conversation would be met with a vague, dismissive response. I felt like I was losing her, that she was drifting away from me on a current I couldn't see or understand. One evening, I tried to talk to her about it. I chose my words carefully, trying to avoid accusation, to frame it as concern. "You seem distant lately, Elle," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Is everything okay?" She looked up from her phone, her expression a mixture of surprise and irritation, as if I had just interrupted something vitally important. "I'm fine, Mark," she said, her tone sharp. "Just tired. It's been a busy week." And that was it. The conversation was over before it had even begun. She had dismissed my concern, and in doing so, she had dismissed me. The wall around her had grown thicker, and I was left on the other side, alone with my growing fears. The financial signs started to appear. Small, unexplained withdrawals from our joint account. Credit card charges for restaurants and bars I had never heard of, in parts of town we never frequented. When I questioned her about them, she was ready with a plausible, if slightly flimsy, explanation. "Oh, that was for Brenda's birthday present. The book club went out for drinks after our meeting." Each lie was another brick in the wall, another layer of deception that separated her world from mine. I started to feel like a detective in my own life, piecing together clues, searching for evidence of a crime I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. I found myself checking her car's mileage, looking for receipts in her purse, becoming a person I didn't recognize and didn't like. This creeping paranoia was a poison, tainting my every thought, my every interaction with her. I was caught in a painful limbo, suspended between the hope that my suspicions were unfounded and the gnawing certainty that they were not. The addiction was undeniable now. It was in the way her fingers would twitch if she was away from her phone for too long. It was in the panic in her eyes if the battery was low. It was in the late nights she spent bathed in the screen's glow, long after I had gone to bed. She was chasing the high of the match, the validation of a new message, the thrill of a secret connection. And in her pursuit of these fleeting digital highs, she was sacrificing the real, tangible connection we had built over a lifetime. I saw the toll it was taking on her. There were dark circles under her eyes, a new tension in her jaw. The youthful glow she had initially gained from this new attention was being replaced by a kind of frantic, brittle energy. She was thinner, yes, but she also looked fragile, as if she were being stretched too thin, pulled in too many different directions. The joy she had initially found in the game had been replaced by a compulsive need, a hunger that could never be satisfied. Our children noticed it too. During a weekend visit, our daughter Jessica took me aside. "What's up with Mom?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "She's been on her phone the whole time. It's like she's not even here." I tried to cover for her, to make excuses, but the words felt hollow even to me. "She's just got a lot on her mind," I said, a feeble attempt to protect a reality that was already crumbling. Jessica wasn't fooled. She saw the distance, the disconnect, and in her eyes, I saw a reflection of my own pain and confusion. The house, once a sanctuary of shared life and love, began to feel like a stage set. We were actors going through the motions, playing the part of a happily married couple, but the script felt forced, the emotions inauthentic. We would have dinner together, the silence punctuated only by the clinking of our silverware and the occasional chime of her phone. We would watch television, our bodies on the same sofa, but our minds in different worlds. The loneliness was suffocating. I had never felt so alone in my life as I did in those months, lying next to my wife in the darkness, listening to the soft tap, tap, tap of her fingers on the screen, each tap a nail in the coffin of our marriage. There was a moment of stark clarity, a moment when the full, devastating reality of the situation hit me with the force of a physical blow. She had told me she was going to a yoga retreat for the weekend. A chance to unplug and recharge, she'd said, the irony of her words lost on her. I had helped her pack, had kissed her goodbye, had wished her a peaceful weekend. That Saturday, I was cleaning out the garage when I came across an old photo album. I sat down on a dusty stool and started flipping through the pages, a journey back in time. There we were, young and carefree, on our wedding day. There we were, exhausted and ecstatic, holding our newborn son. There we were, on family vacations, at birthday parties, at Christmas mornings. Page after page of a shared life, a shared history, a shared love. And as I sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, my phone buzzed. It was an email from our credit card company, a fraud alert. I opened it, my heart pounding. There was a charge from a hotel, a fancy boutique hotel in the city, for that very night. A charge for a room for two, and a subsequent charge from the hotel's high-end restaurant. The lie was laid bare, stripped of all its flimsy disguises. She wasn't at a yoga retreat. She was with someone else. She was with James or David or Michael or any one of the other faceless men from the app. She was living a different life, a life that did not include me. The pain was indescribable. It was a physical ache in my chest, a hollowness that seemed to swallow all the air from my lungs. I looked at the photograph in my hands, a picture of us on our 20th anniversary, smiling, happy, oblivious to the fault line that was already forming beneath our feet. And I finally understood. The woman in that photograph, the woman I had loved for 25 years, was gone, and I didn't know if she was ever coming back. The game was over. The whispers had become screams, and the silence that followed was the sound of our world breaking apart. The weekend was a blur of muted agony. I moved through the house like a ghost, the silence amplifying the storm of thoughts and emotions raging within me. The credit card alert was the key, the undeniable proof that unlocked the door I had been too terrified to open. My denial had been a dam, holding back a flood of painful truths, and now that dam had broken. The water was rushing in, cold and relentless, and I was drowning. When Eleanor returned on Sunday evening, she was glowing. She spoke of tranquil meditations and invigorating yoga sessions, painting a detailed picture of a weekend that had never happened. Each word was a fresh stab of betrayal. I watched her, this stranger with my wife's face, and felt a profound sense of dislocation. How could she lie so effortlessly, so convincingly? The woman I married was terrible at deception. A slight flush of her cheeks and inability to meet my eyes always gave her away. This woman, however, was a seasoned performer. She looked me straight in the eye and described the sunrise over a lake I knew she had not seen. The confrontation was not a dramatic, shouting affair. My anger was a cold, hard knot in my stomach, too heavy for explosive rage. I waited until we were in the living room, the space where we had shared so much of our lives. I held my phone in my hand, the email from the hotel displayed on the screen. I didn't say a word. I just showed it to her. For a moment, she stared at it, her brow furrowed in confusion, as if trying to process a foreign language. Then recognition dawned, and the color drained from her face. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the fear and guilt that lay beneath. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. It was in that silence that our marriage died. Her first instinct was to lie again, a desperate, reflexive attempt to patch the gaping hole in her story. She stammered about a mix-up, about her friend booking the wrong place, about a last-minute change of plans. The excuses were weak, pathetic, and they dissolved in the face of my stony silence. Finally, the fight seemed to go out of her. She sank onto the sofa, her shoulders slumped in defeat. And then the truth began to emerge, not in a flood, but in a slow, painful trickle. It started with one man, James, the one from the text message I had seen months ago. It was just a coffee, she said, just a conversation. It was exciting, a harmless thrill. He made her feel seen, she explained, her voice barely a whisper. He listened to her in a way she felt I no longer did. The words were a bitter pill to swallow. Had I been so absent, so complacent, that my wife had to seek validation from a stranger on the internet? The confession continued, each admission chipping away at the remnants of our shared history. The coffee had led to dinner. The dinner had led to a hotel room. It wasn't just James. There had been others. Not many, she insisted, as if the number somehow mitigated the betrayal. They were just flings, meaningless encounters. They didn't mean anything. She said it over and over again, a mantra of self-delusion. It didn't mean anything, Mark. It was just something to do. It wasn't about them. It was about me. She tried to explain the addiction, the compulsive need for the next swipe, the next match, the next hit of validation. She spoke of feeling old, invisible, of a deep-seated fear that her life was over, that the best years were behind her. Tinder, she said, was an escape. It was a fantasy world where she could be anyone she wanted to be, a world where she was eternally young, desirable, and free from the comfortable, predictable reality of our life. I listened, but I couldn't feel any sympathy. All I could feel was the searing pain of her betrayal. Her search for herself had been conducted on the ruins of our marriage. Her quest for validation had been paid for with my trust, my love, my heart. The hours that followed were a surreal journey through the wreckage of our life. She showed me the app, the countless messages, the gallery of men who had taken my place. I saw the flirtatious banter, the explicit conversations, the plans for secret meetings. It was a glimpse into a secret life I never knew existed, a life she had been living right under my nose. Each message was a new wound, each picture a fresh wave of nausea. The sheer scale of her deception was staggering. The lies were not just about the meetings, the affairs. They were woven into the very fabric of our daily lives. The book club, the yoga classes, the dinners with Brenda, all of it, a complex tapestry of deceit designed to conceal her secret world. I felt like a fool, a naive, trusting fool who had failed to see what was happening in his own home. The night was endless. We talked, we cried, we circled the same painful truths over and over again. She begged for forgiveness, swore it was over, that she would delete the app, that she would do anything to fix what she had broken. But the words sounded hollow. How could I ever trust her again? How could I look at her and not see the lies, not see the stranger she had been with? The foundation of our marriage, the bedrock of trust we had built over 25 years, had been pulverized. There was nothing left to build on. The next morning, a fragile, exhausted silence filled the house. The truth was out, a raw, open wound between us. We moved around each other like strangers, the familiar intimacy of our home now feeling alien and oppressive. I looked at the photographs on the mantelpiece, the smiling faces from a life that no longer felt real. It was all a lie, a beautifully curated collection of moments that concealed a rotten core. I knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, that I could not stay. To stay would be to accept the unacceptable, to live with the ghost of her betrayal in every room, in every silence.
It would be a slow, painful death of the spirit. I told her I was leaving. The words were heavy, final. I saw the panic in her eyes, the dawning realization that her actions had consequences, that she could not just erase the past and pretend it had never happened. She pleaded with me to stay, to try counseling, to give us another chance. But I couldn't. The damage was too extensive, the betrayal too profound. I packed a bag, my hands moving with a strange, detached efficiency. I took only what I needed, leaving behind the artifacts of a life that was no longer mine. As I walked out the door to the home we had built together, the home where we had raised our children, the home where I thought we would grow old together, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The future was a vast, terrifying unknown, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own. The roar of the fire she had started had finally subsided, leaving behind a landscape of ash and ruin.
And as I drove away, I knew that my journey was no longer about salvaging our past, but about figuring out how to build a future for myself, alone, out of the wreckage. The days and weeks that followed my departure were a hollow echo of a life I once knew. I stayed in a sterile, impersonal extended stay hotel, a place for people in transition, a waiting room for the next chapter of their lives. The anonymity of it was a strange comfort. I was just another man in a nondescript room, with no history, no memories clinging to the walls. The silence was the loudest thing. In the house, even in the painful final months, there had been the hum of a shared life, the background noise of another person's existence. Here, there was only the drone of the air conditioner and the frantic monologue of my own thoughts. The process of untangling our lives was a brutal, bureaucratic autopsy of a relationship. Lawyers, financial statements, the division of assets. Each piece of paper was a stark reminder of what we had built together and what was now being systematically dismantled. The house, our home, became a property to be valued and sold. The savings we had accumulated for our retirement became a figure to be divided. Our shared history was being reduced to a series of legal and financial transactions, a cold, impersonal severing of a bond I once thought was unbreakable. Telling the children was the hardest part. How do you explain to your adult children that the foundation of their lives, the story of their family, was not what it seemed? We met them for dinner at a neutral restaurant, the three of us forming a broken, grieving triangle. Eleanor tried to explain, her voice faltering, her words a tangled mess of regret and self-justification. I saw the confusion and pain in my children's eyes, and my heart broke all over again. They were not just losing the image of their parents' happy marriage, they were losing a piece of their own history, their own identity. They were no easy answers, no simple villain or victim. They were caught in the crossfire of our failure, and I could offer them no comfort other than the assurance that my love for them remained unchanged, a single, solid point in a world that had been thrown into chaos. I started to reflect on our 25 years together, searching for the cracks, the moments where things started to go wrong. Was it just the app? Was Tinder the cause, or merely the symptom of a deeper malaise that had taken root long before? I thought back to the years when the kids were growing up, the whirlwind of school runs, soccer practice, and homework. We were a team then, a well-oiled machine focused on the task of raising a family. But somewhere along the way, after the nest emptied, we had forgotten how to be just Mark and Eleanor. We had lost the thread of our own connection, the intimacy that existed outside of our roles as parents. The silence that Eleanor had tried to fill with the constant validation of strangers had started long before she downloaded the app. It had crept into our evenings, into our conversations, into the space between us in our bed. We had become two people living parallel lives under the same roof, co-managers of a household rather than partners in a passionate, evolving relationship. I had been complicit in that distance. I had retreated into my work, into my hobbies, into the comfortable, predictable rhythm of my own life. I had stopped pursuing her, stopped trying to surprise her, stopped vocalizing the love and admiration I still felt for her.
I had taken her for granted, assuming our foundation was indestructible, that it required no maintenance, no effort. I had been a good husband, a loyal husband, a providing husband. But had I been an engaged husband? The question haunted me. Her addiction to Tinder was a desperate, destructive attempt to feel something, to break through the comfortable numbness that had settled over our lives. It was a search for a spark, and in her recklessness, she had burned the whole house down.
I started going to therapy, a step I would have once dismissed as a sign of weakness. I sat in a quiet room with a kind, intelligent woman and unpacked the pain, the anger, the grief. I talked about Eleanor, about the betrayal, but I also talked about myself, about my own role in the slow, silent erosion of our marriage. It was a painful, humbling process, but it was also a necessary one. I began to understand that forgiveness was not about excusing her actions, but about releasing myself from the prison of my own bitterness. I would never forget what she did, but I could not let it define the rest of my life. I saw Eleanor periodically during the divorce proceedings. She looked diminished, the frantic energy replaced by a deep, weary sadness. She told me she was in therapy too, that she was trying to understand the addiction, to confront the emptiness she had tried to fill with the attention of strangers. I felt a flicker of the old affection, a pang of sympathy for the woman I had once loved, lost and adrift in the mess she had created. But it was fleeting. The chasm between us was too wide, the betrayal too deep to ever be bridged. The divorce was finalized on a gray, overcast Tuesday. I walked out of the lawyer's office a single man for the first time in 25 years. There was no sense of celebration, no feeling of freedom, just a profound, aching emptiness. That evening, I went back to my hotel room and ordered a pizza. I ate it out of the box, sitting on the edge of the bed, the television playing to an empty room. And for the first time, I cried. Not for the loss of my wife, but for the loss of the life I thought I would have. I cried for the young man who had stood at an altar, full of hope and promise, with no idea of the long, winding, and ultimately heartbreaking road that lay ahead. The journey since that day has been slow, uncertain. There are good days when the sun seems to shine a little brighter, when the future feels like a possibility rather than a threat. And there are bad days when the ghost of the past lingers, when a song on the radio or a familiar scent can send me spiraling back into the pain. I am learning to be alone again, to find comfort in my own company. I am rebuilding my life, piece by piece, not on the ruins of the old one, but on a new foundation, one that is entirely my own. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I will ever trust someone enough to love again. But I do know this. I survived. The fire swept through my life and burned it to the ground, but it did not destroy me. I am still standing. And in the quiet solitude of my new life, I am slowly, painstakingly beginning to find my way back to myself. Thanks for listening. I'm curious. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed how you saw someone you thought you knew? Let me know in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers.